Leagueheads, and welcome to The League, exploring the League of Legends lore from A to Z. My name is Rebecca.
And I'm John.
My name is Mark.
And today we get to talk about the Burning Vengeance brand, who was released April 12th, 2011. So he is almost 10 years old now.
Ooh, well, we'll have to celebrate his 10-year anniversary when it comes up. By burning shit, I guess.
All right, we were going to light our houses on fire in honor of Brand's 10-year anniversary. So on his universe page, he doesn't have much. He just has his bio and then a short story called From the Ashes. This is, I guess, the standard amount of lore we see for everyone, a bio and a short story, although there's apparently a crap ton more that Riot just elected to not put on the universe page.
Yeah, slightly less in this one, I'll give him that, but there is still like a whole ass comic where Brand is the antagonist that they decided not to include on the Brand on Brand's page.
Yeah, it's weird. You said it wasn't linked on the Rise page either, correct?
Yeah, it's not on, and Rise is the main character of the comic, and it's not on his page either. And I even double checked to make sure, like, okay, maybe this is old lore, so like they got rid of it because it had been retconned, but it's following the new lore, so yeah. I don't know.
I was gonna say, even if it's old, it's a pretty cool comic. I think it's worth keeping on there. At least his short story is kind of a long short story, to be fair.
Yeah, it is one of the...
So that's something.
One of the more detailed ones. And providing with more information than just, here's the bio you read, but in a different words, like when you copy like a wiki entry for an essay, you know?
Yeah, I think this story in particular, I think, did a really good job. I remember reading the bio. I feel like I had questions, or like I was curious about some things, like how did this go down? And it was like everything that I was curious about in the bio, the short story went into more detail and answered, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoyed it, I guess I'll say right at the outset. I found myself really enjoying getting into this brand lore. So...
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I knew jack shit about Brand, so I was surprised that he's from the Freljord. He's made of fire. I really didn't think he was going to be from there, but he is.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, my brain didn't go there. I would think a lot of people would be friends with Brand. He'd be so warm to hang out with. I also didn't know he was tied to Rise so closely, so that was interesting too. But I will go over the bio the best way I can. Reading my notes, there's a couple of things. One, I can't read my own handwriting sometimes. And two, there were a lot of terms. This is one of those bios that had so many words and people that I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, who is this? What is this word? Which, Riot does a lot. But Brand's birth name was Kegan. Like I said, he's from the Freljord. The little village he's from is Rygan's Reach? Rygan's Reach?
I read it as Rygans, Rygann.
Yes. Those look like the letters I wrote down. He was raised by his mother, who was a healer in their village. His father was, and I'm quoting, Enemy Reaver. I don't know what that is.
It's just an invader.
Yeah, there are, in Legends of Runeterra, there are a few cards that use the word Reaver specifically, and they seem to be Winter's Claw, or at least people who talk a lot of shit about Avarosan tribes, so I'm assuming Winter's Claw tribes then, so I think we can assume that he was probably under that umbrella, maybe.
Okay, cool. Anyway, people in the village didn't like this about Brand, so Brand and his mother were kind of outsiders in their own village. One day, Brand's mother dies, I guess just because she's all frail and weak, and the Freljord is harsh and cruel. Kegan cremates her, and at her funeral, nobody comes to pay respects, despite her being a healer who has probably saved all of their lives at some point. A little harsh. So I don't really blame Kegan when he burns down the village and leaves. Outside, they mentioned that he's just kind of like wandering now in the cold, much like Ash. Doesn't run into her, though. Instead, he is found by Rise, who takes him as an apprentice. Rise, however, kind of has his own story going on. He's looking for these magical runes that are all real powerful. He finds one, but unfortunately Kegan grabs it first, despite Rise telling him, no, please don't do that. So he, his soul is kind of destroyed, is how it is phrased, and he becomes engulfed in flames, and he is now Brand, kind of just hunting for more runes now, I guess, to get more powerful.
More runes, more power, man. Yeah.
Like they say.
Those with the runes make the rules.
Like Biggie Smalls always said, mo runes, mo problems.
I got 99 problems, but a rune ain't one.
How many other rap songs can we fit into this?
They're not even like good rhymes. They're just like...
They're not at all. Anyway, that's his bio. How did we feel about it?
I mean, I said at the outset, I liked it. I felt like even from what's here, I could see how, kind of like you said, you can kind of sympathize with him burning down the village, which is a strange thing to sympathize with.
Yeah.
But I could see how he could become a villain in a way that made sense. Compare this to Zareth, where Zareth, we had a lot of trouble kind of figuring out how he got to there. And with this, there was already a sympathetic kind of core to him, and him becoming a villain seems reasonable from the way his upbringing is described.
Yeah, he's really hated his whole life for, something that was very out of his control, which it's not something that's unrealistic for a village of people to treat him this way, as seeing him as the enemy despite being a child. And then we learn, we kind of get a hint of it in the bio, but we learn in the story as well that his mother also wasn't very caring and affectionate towards him, so he was very much alone. I like a sympathetic villain. I'm trying to I wish I would have gone back and looked at the champions we've done already. I think, yes, Brand becoming a villain makes a lot of sense for his backstory, and him being sympathetic makes him a really complex villain that you have to root against him because he's so evil, but it hurts because he had such a hard life. But I would also like Riot to occasionally, and maybe we'll see this more later, have a backstory like this where they don't become a villain, where he becomes a hero instead. Because I think instead we're seeing people who have these horrible backgrounds always kind of falling to evil. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So I do like the backstory, but yeah.
I was going to say, the little bit that we saw about Sejuani and War Mother, I think might be the closest thing we've seen of that so far, where there's somebody who, there's actually kind of a lot of parallels between seemingly her mother and Bran's mother, and that they're both very not affectionate in any way. But Sejuani, while still Sejuani's even still kind of quasi-villainous, but there's more shades of gray than Brand, who's definitely a villain by where he's at now.
Yeah, I would say Ash is probably a good example, actually.
Yes, Ash had a difficult background as well, but she also had a lot of people who really loved and respected.
People in her corner.
Yeah, Brand had absolutely no one in his corner. Zareth didn't really have anyone in his corner,
Although, Brand had Rise in his corner.
That's
eventually.
Fair. Yeah, for a little bit.
Bit, yeah. I feel like the timetable of this story eluded me a bit until we read the short story. There were a few things I was surprised about in the short story.
Yeah, he doesn't spend a lot of time with Rise, right?
I'm not 100% clear on, because in the story, and I guess we'll get to it, but I think they've been together a few weeks, it says, when we kind of see, but it's only a day or two that we see of them interacting. And I don't know how far along that relationship was before the turn happened. So it could have been months, maybe even a few years at most, I would hope, right? But who knows?
Yeah, although on the other hand, they were on their way, I think, to pick up one of the runes, right? And Rise said that they were at least a few weeks out. So it could have also just been a few weeks, because if he just grabbed the first thing and was like, oh shit, I could use this, it may have just been then that happened. Just
a month total. If they've been traveling for a few weeks and then there are a few weeks. Yeah, you're probably right, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to it being that way. It makes a lot more sense for him to turn on Rise so quickly, and to just be impatient for power, but it's a lot less painful of a relationship. Whereas if Rise had been training him for years, that would have been more of a heartbreaking betrayal.
Yeah, and I think like given, especially when you read the comic, like especially given the, I guess, hatred that Brand has towards Rise, it's a lot for what you'd expect from having known him for like 1 month. Like you'd expect like even if you were to become a creature of pure power and hatred, like, I mean, let it go, man. You only need the guy for a month.
There's bigger fish to fry. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I guess that kind of highlights, in my mind, one of the biggest pieces we're missing in all of this, which is seeing what kind of that fall and that betrayal, whatever you want to call it, the kind of the conclusion to that relationship. And I think getting that is the thing that I need the most when it comes to Brand, to really understand him, right?
Yeah, I agree. Is it really, I mean, is Kegan dead is kind of how we're feeling? Like, is Brand like a new creature?
So, old lore compared to new lore.
Oh, okay. Ooh, here we
Old
go.
lore, yeah, he would be dead. And Brand is a kind of an ageless creature that just takes over the body. New lore, though, I think Kegan is technically still there. But like his memories at least are still there, but he's just kind of lost who he is. Because in the comic, like he definitely he remembers everything that he went through with Rise, and he mocks him constantly for failing him as a teacher.
For that 1 month that he couldn't quite learn everything.
But what a month, man.
What is he, like 12? Calm down.
Yeah, but I think in this one he's not necessarily just like a vessel for the Brand being anymore. I think he just has like he's just been corrupted by the stone, like by the stone's power.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my reading of it, but I think it's definitely a good question to raise, and it was something that I'm not 100% on. We can only guess, because it does say that, I think the exact wording is that his soul is burnt away, and it's not clear what that means exactly.
Yeah, we don't know how souls work. Like, is his soul in the spirit realm? Then what's inside? What's left there?
Yeah, I will say in this one, I think more than any of the other ones we've talked about so far, there's a lot of, I wouldn't necessarily call it conflicting information, but there's a lot more guesswork that we have to do than a lot of the other ones. There's a lot of potential connections, but they're not like strictly called out, so like, oh, maybe this is it, but I don't know if the timeline's aligned, or like maybe this is how it works, but like, is this old lore or new lore? Because a few of them get confused.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know for a fact that the blurb on his universe page is explicitly old lore and is wrong.
Really?
Yeah, the little blurb on the universe talks about the old lore, which involved him just being, he was actually a reaver or a raider, I think, and him abandoning his compatriots to go seek out this world rune, which is not, obviously wrong in old lore. So I think there's a lot of that happening here too.
Although same name, which made it doubly confusing.
Yeah, like great, awesome.
They liked the name Kegan. They were into it.
Yeah.
It's striking, I guess you could say. I don't know. Don't mind it.
It's a good name. So do we want to jump to the short story then?
Yeah, for sure. I'll try and summarize that as much as painlessly as possible. It's pretty long, and I would definitely recommend reading it to supplement the bio, but we'll just try and hit the major points. So, as we said, it is following Rise and Kegan about a few weeks after their initial meeting. They are traveling to a non-specific location somewhere in the northwestern Freljord, ostensibly, we would guess, to go get a world rune or a fragment of a world rune, which I know that sometimes it's just pieces of them, not like the whole rune. I don't know the details of any of that, but I think it does mention that it is a piece. Anyway, so Rise is kind of acting as an adopted master, mentor to Kegan, and he is starting to train him to use his inherent magic. Something in the bio that I don't think they did a great job of kind of pointing out is that Kegan does have this sort of internal magical ability, and we only kind of see that in this story for the most part. But that's there. He's kind of teaching him. And Kegan is obviously struggling. He is impatient, I think was a word you had used, Rebecca, and that's something they highlight a lot with him. He is, I'll say now, I think what I liked a lot about this is that it showcases how someone growing up in the Freljord could end up really fucked up, where it's just this completely harsh, inhospitable environment, and he's just a creature of almost just raw instinct, who just lashes out at things that he perceives as danger with violence. So he's having trouble with the magic. The relationship, I would say, is kind of genial, but there's definitely tension between them, which I liked a lot as well, the kind of edge that goes on while they're interacting. And as they're traveling, Rise is telling, Kegan about Shurima, and Kegan doesn't even believe him that there's a place where there's not snow and ice, which I thought was neat. And as Rise is teaching Kegan, we do get some insights into the nature of magic in Runeterra, so we kind of get that magic energy kind of is just everywhere at all times throughout the world. Most of the things we associate with it, like talismans, spellbooks, etc., are attempts to control magic, to bind it to one's will, and Rise very much insists and is trying to teach that you can just influence it and suggest it, do what you want, and that's all you need. And when you're able to do that, the real issue becomes not using magic and not giving in to that temptation. Foreshadowing, right? So one night they've got a fire going and Keegan's sleeping, and then most of the story kind of goes into the dreams he's having, or really just kind of flashbacks to his past, and we see a lot of his, what happened to him to mess him up so bad. So we see him at 7 interacting with his mother, Krezia, Krezia, It comes in at like the very end of the story.
Yeah.
Whatever her name is. And we see, like we said, that she is very uncaring. She's reproachful. Is that a good word to use?
I think so.
There's even there's an instance where she touches him, and he talks about it being this super rare occurrence of her even having contact, like physical contact with him. So very much a massive distance between the two. And he kind of sees that she is very spiteful of him, kind of hates him as a result of the relationship between her and the father, which is something we should talk about to try and deduce what that is exactly.
Are we gonna have like almost back-to-back rape discussions about this fucking?
This one I think is up in the air much more than Azir because of a specific line. But we can delve into it because it does raise that question for sure, right? Anyway, so then we skip forward a little bit to him at about 13, and he meets a girl named Svana. Svana is one of new arrivals coming from a clan that has dwindled. Her father needs healing, and while they are going to the village to bring the herbs, they're talking, and we kind of get some insight into Kegan, again, being massively isolated, having no one around him. She says that she'll be his friend, and so this is likely his first friend, and I would pick up from context clues, maybe the beginnings of a small childhood romance. Now, I'm not 100% if it was reciprocated or just a one-sided thing. I read it as they had kind of had something, and it had fallen away. But anyway, skip forward a little bit to him at 16 during a solstice celebration, which the way they describe it almost reminded me of like a prom type situation where everyone's getting drunk and all the young teenagers are swearing love and fighting each other, and the next day is like, oh man, I can't believe I told her I loved her. What the fuck am I going to do? Anyway, so Keegan's been fire dancing, which the boys do to impress the girls apparently, but he can't find Svana, and eventually goes and finds her at the shore where she is being betrothed to someone else in a kind of quasi-arranged marriage thing, but it does definitely state that she did not say, she had the ability to say like, no, I don't want to do this, and didn't, and is engaging in it willingly. So Kegan confronts her, and she kind of rejects him, and he's willing to accept it, which I liked that he was willing to say, okay, I can get past this. But then he's confronted by Reigen, who's the, I guess, founder and patriarch of this Reigen's Reach village. And Reigen talks some mad shit, and he gets a group to drag Kegan away. And Kegan, just, again, defaulting to that violent instinct, swings for the first person he can hit, and he cracks Svana's dad right in the fucking jaw and breaks it. Which is not a good look, I suppose. Fast forward again to Kegan at 19, and he's burning his mother on a funeral pyre. I think she died from disease, because there's a line he has later on saying about the disease was not what killed her, but I mean, literally that is what did kill her. But so one person does actually show up, despite what the bio says, and it's 3 people. It's Svana with her husband and their young son. Svana informs Kegan that Reigen is going to make him leave the village now that his mother's gone. And Kegan says he's fine leaving. He's going to go out and go search for his father. Probably will go die, but he does a really, I don't want to say good job, but Kegan a lot is always kind of keeping things internally. He's very rarely, he'll know like, I'm probably going to fucking die, but I don't want to say that. Is kind of the way that he operates a lot. And he's like, okay, I'll leave. I'll go get some supplies in the village. And Svana says, And also, you're not allowed in the village anymore. Rygan's also banned you from going in the village. So that night, Kegan sneaks into Rygan's home and wakes Rygan up at knife point. And he gets some last words in, kind of talking about how, like I said, it's not the disease that killed my mother. It was you all. You killed her every day by keeping her out there. And you want to kill me as well by forcing me to leave. And it's then revealed that the home is filled with oil. I did like at the start of this whole scene, Rygan wakes up and he smells the oil in his nostrils, but the reveal doesn't come till much later. So it's a nice sensory detail, I guess I would say, to kind of foreshadow a little bit of what we all know is about to happen. Kegan throws the lantern, leaves. He's laughing the whole time, even though he does get burned on his face in the process. Now, winds carry that fire through the village. Kegan sees that things have gotten way out of hand after he's walked off for a bit, comes back and finds Savannah and her husband and child, her whole family, amongst the dead, which is a very shitty thing for him to kind of realize what he's done. And eventually he leaves the village and wanders out into the tundra and resigns himself to die in a cave until Rise shows up and saves him, essentially. So snap back to reality out from the dreams. The next morning, Kegan is asking Rise about magic and its origin specifically, and he's pointing out that everything comes from something, so magic must come from something, right? And he kind of postulates that, well, if you could control where magic comes from, you could truly control magic. You wouldn't have to worry about bending it to your will or suggesting it, as Rise has kind of said. Now, unknowingly, he's pretty much talking about the world runes, which is a very interesting thing for him to just stumble upon through his own logical thought process. And upon hearing this, Rise tells him, we will discuss this at a later juncture, you're not ready. But Kegan very clearly sees fear in Rise's eyes and notes that fear is a weakness, and weaknesses are to be faced and conquered. And that's the end of the story, essentially, is that.
So I guess, so first thing, it was just kind of a random quote. Like you mentioned, they have kind of I wouldn't necessarily call it a contentious relationship, but like there's awkwardness between them. Like Rise is super educated, like he's been around for a very long time. He just knows a ton of stuff. And Kegan is like literally a Freljordian barbarian. He knows nothing other than like the cave he lived in and the tiny town he grew up in. So Rise is constantly saying stuff that he doesn't understand. There was kind of a tension between them, and a quote I liked was like, Rise broke the tension by saying, "There it is, the wisdom of a barbarian who cannot yet read, nor count past the number of fingers on his hands." And like that was the thing that made Kegan like smile and be like, "Yeah, that's me." It seemed like such a weird thing to break the tension.
I mean, I like it. I liked the relationship between these two, and that's why I would love to see the eventual kind of fall, because I would like to see the conclusion to it. And I can see how Kegan could kind of be willing to let his guard down at least a little bit when dealing with Rise, because Rise is kind of willing to be honest with him in that way. So I like that as a detail, I guess I would say, between the two.
Yeah, I liked how often Kegan wanted to hide that, how embarrassed he was. That was very real. When you're around someone who is a lot more educated than you are, there's a lot of self-consciousness that happens, and you'd want to kind of hide a lot of your ignorance. So that was a little detail that I liked.
Yeah, there's a lot of internal monologue, like, should I say this or should I say nothing?
Yeah.
If I say nothing, maybe you won't think that I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I thought they did a really good job in this of just really making Kegan feel very rounded out and very fleshed out as a character. He's got some nice insight, wisdom versus intelligence. He's very insightful in terms of how he can kind of perceive what people are, and they kind of hint that maybe some of that is the result of his magical abilities, that he can kind of understand what people are thinking or what they're, I don't know, feeling in a way that is not just natural. But even still, there's a sharpness to him in that way that belies his barbarian upbringing and ways,
Yeah. The writer of this, by the way, was Aaron Dembski Bowden.
I also really liked the breath exercise that Rise had Kegan do as kind of a way to demonstrate how you should think about magic, where he kind of had him hold a breath and then Kegan was like, I'm gonna hold this breath as long as I can. I'm gonna hold it until I pass out. Damn it! And Rise was like, I just told you, breath doesn't belong to you. It's just something that goes in and it goes out, but you held on to it, much like you're trying to hold on to magic. That's why the magic isn't working for you. You need to let it in and let it out. Don't try and control it. Also foreshadowing.
Yeah, exactly. There's a nice bit of foreshadowing kind of peppered throughout here in a way that doesn't feel terribly heavy-handed. It felt nice and natural. And I like Rise also. I know this is not that much about Rise, but I like him as a sort of mentor, but also maybe not somebody who's 100% equipped to be it. So they're both kind of trying to learn and deal with this as they're trying to develop this relationship. The problem is that they're playing with fire, as it were, right? Yeah. I mean, I would say also, I mentioned compare the bio to Zareth, but compare this to Azir in so far as embodying someone who has done villainous acts, someone who has done horrible things, but somebody who you might want to see become a hero. Kind of like you said, Rebecca, someone who you could root for to rise up to the challenge and overcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or be really entertained by the tragedy of them not rising up even.
Yeah, the story clearing up the idea that he didn't burn down the entire village, I think was an important aspect of him being a bit more sympathetic.
Yeah, that was a roller
For
coaster
sure.
for me, because I know we were reading through the bio, and it's like, all right, yeah, that village kind of sucked. Like, I'm in favor of him burning it. And then when you start the story and you find out that he has a friend in the village, you're like, oh my god, you burnt the village with your friend in it? But then you actually get to that part in the story, and it's like, oh, okay, it was a misunderstanding. You just burnt this asshole's house, and miscalculation.
Whoopsie daisies. Yeah.
To be fair, he's really bad at math. He can't count past 10. So
It was a calculated risk, but man, am I bad at math.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just a lot of details in here that I really enjoyed. I mentioned it before, but I really like him, hearing about Shurima and not even believing it. I was like, okay, yeah. Somewhere where it's not snow. And Rise is saying, they're like, how do I even explain this to this guy? And it's like, okay, what the fuck ever. Or Rise starts trying to explain what the Aurora Borealis is.
Oh, I love
actually,
that, yeah.
and just abandons the idea immediately. It's like, no, whatever.
Because they're laying there looking at it, and Kegan was like, the gods are angry tonight, or something along those lines. Yeah. And Rise is like, actually, it's not gods, it's just never mind. You're not going to get this.
And I think that made a lot of sense, knowing how long they had been traveling together. Because I think at the beginning of the story, I had assumed that they had been together longer. It wasn't kind of until closer to the end of the story that you, I think, see how long they've actually been together. So, seeing that they've only been together for a few weeks, I really liked all the times where Rise specifically had to go out of his way to be like, what is worth attempting to explain, and what is worth just kind of leaving up to his imagination. I don't want to come off condescending, but what would he know?
For sure. I don't know. I thought the writing was very strong. There was an echoing of moments where Kegan will kind of see something in someone, and it very much cements almost like his perspective of how they view him. The strongest one being, of course, when he kind of sees that he asks his mom if she hates him, or is that why she hates him, and she pauses, and he can just tell. That's the pause is what I needed, right? Or that moment at the end when he sees that fear in Rise's eyes, and it kind of cements for him, Rise is not infallible. Rise is somebody who, I could be better than at some point. And even that little interaction with Zvana at I guess I would say the funeral pyre, where he can kind of tell before she even says it, I'm not going to be allowed back into the village. She does tell him, but he infers it, or kind of, again, has a very sharp insight into people and can kind of pick it up before he even doesn't need to be told,
Yeah, he's an interesting character. It was definitely a story that actually does make you feel and learn something about the character that they're talking about, which is actually a little, not rare, but not as common in a lot of the stories that we've been reading.
I think rare is a fine word to use.
We'll see. We're only on the B's, but...
Yeah, with our sample size, I guess you would say. I was gonna say I'm just pulling out moments that I really enjoyed. I really liked when he's gone back to the village and the people there they're cursing him, but ironically, they're not cursing him for what he's actually done, which is the fire. They're cursing him because of the beliefs that they have about him, right? And it's a nice sort of poignant irony. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Like, oh, we don't think you started the fire. We do think you're responsible for it because you're bad luck.
Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, it's strange. I definitely think the writing is an important factor about why it works well. And, like, pulling something out that I think is done well is the dialogue, which I don't think I've gotten to say about a story yet. There have been stories. I think the Akali one was really well done as well in that respect, but dialogue can be tough, and I think it's done well here.
Yeah. Actually, speaking about the infallibility of Rise, I think one of the dialogue bits that I liked a lot too was when Kegan first brought up to him, like, something you said the other day sounded like a lie.
Yeah.
And he's like, I am a lot of things, and a lot of them aren't good, but I'm not a liar.
Yeah.
I kind of broadly, to me, he's Kegan. It's okay. So the first thing I would say is that the only issue I kind of have with all of this is that I feel like we're not talking about Brand. We're talking about Kegan, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is kind of why I want that third piece, because I think that would help bridge that gap between Brand as we see in the comics versus Kegan as we've seen him here. But I was going to say Kegan is a better Anakin than Anakin. That's how I saw it. I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I agree. Yeah, for sure. But I still, like you said, there are some pieces missing, and I don't see Kegan and Brand as the same person. And maybe I'm not supposed to, but I'm like, I forgot we were talking about Brand.
Yeah, we need an Aatrox. We need a story like Aatrox, like through the eyes, but like written by the person who wrote the Kegan story.
For sure. Yeah, I would love that. Something to help, like I said, bridge that gap for sure is what I would really like here.
So do we want to talk about, I think the only thing we haven't touched on in the story in the bio that we kind of talked about a little bit was Kegan's father. Do we know anything?
Yeah. Well, John, I don't think, like I said, we don't have a lot of specifics.
Context clues to go on, and that's context about it, unfortunately. We know that he was a raider who was considered an enemy of the tribe. We know that the similarities that Kegan's mother sees in him to his father makes her hate him. Mm-hmm. And those are the context clues we have to go on. So whether like there was a legitimate relationship here and then he just left, which is also possible, or whether it was the darker of the two options, which unfortunately is likely the most common in an invading marauder sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly true, and it was something that played in my mind the whole time, trying to understand what is the context. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned the bit about her kind of hating his father through the his image, I guess you would say, like through his seeing him echoed in Kegan's face, because in that same line there was a line where she says, his eyes always looking at me, his crime always there to remind me, which what that crime is a very big question. But she also then says, and now his words, his spite thrown in my face, which would make me think that they had some sort of verbal exchanges, right? Something that would point to them having a tumultuous and ultimately failed relationship. That's kind of the life preserver that I'm throwing out here for this whole piece, is that line right there.
I agree, Mark. I wish they would have gone into more detail, and I don't know if the writer just doesn't understand the implications that he was throwing out by being so vague. But I agree. If this was just an assault in response to some kind of raid, she wouldn't know anything about this man except maybe what he looked like. So I think when she's talking to Kegan and says, like, you really are your father's son, in regards to, like, how he talks to her, I think that implies that she knew him in some way. Which, not to say that erases the idea of an assault was possible, but it's not like it was a quick raid.
The thing I was going to say about that, though, is I think there's actually a bit of a conflict in my opinion between the bio and this story in terms of what is the source of their hate. Because in the bio it says almost explicitly that it's because he's a reaver bastard is the epithet that they use for him, and that's why they're isolated. But in the story, we definitely much more get the sense that it's her magical abilities is what kind of sets her away. At least that was the read I got off of it, was and contributed to why they also didn't like Kegan. Is that, I mean, they also talk about this idea of him, because he's got this blood of this enemy in him, has kind of fucked up this line, this what's the word when it's, oh no, the word is escaping me. When it's hereditary, that's the word. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This hereditary sort of line has been broken or tainted by this. So my read was that the magics are now considered to be, have turned dark or something like that. But I think it's a conflict between the two.
She does specifically they also outline a lot of instances where Kegan gets into fights in town and things like that. And one thing that she specifically says was don't give them any reason to fear you, as opposed to don't be a dick and make them hate you, which would be what you'd expect to hear from someone who's just causing a fight. But it's more of don't make them think there's anything here that's not here.
Yeah, and I know that, for example, in that scene where he has woken up, where he's in Reigen's hut and he's got the knife to him, Reigen sees the knife and he's like, oh, that used to belong to that witch, Frieza, or whatever her name was, and it is rumored to have been used in blood rituals. And so even Reigen, who's the leader of this whole place, buys into these stories, and that to me helped cement this idea that the fear comes from superstition. I know Kegan will refer to them as superstitious animals, and what killed her was your fear and hatred of this. I think the magic is what we're supposed to take away from this as the thing that keeps them at arm's length, if that, right? I just prefer that interpretation because it's less grim.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So now the last bit of lore, I think, that we have actually does touch a bit on Brand as opposed to Brand as Kegan, which is nice. This is the comic The Burning Lands. So this mostly follows Rise. Basically, Rise is in Shurima hunting for world runes. So the way it's kind of described is Rise collected a bunch of world runes and then he hid them all across the world, separate from each other, hoping that no one would be able to collect them. Now that Brand has a lot of power, given that he has the power of one of the world runes, he's now able to search for them and actually undo all of the magical bindings that Rise put in place to protect them. So Rise is now going around the world collecting all of the ones he had previously hidden to try and protect them from Brand. So he's in Shurima, and he actually sees Brand in the distance going after one of the runes he knows is there. So he and a woman, Kala, who's the head of a Shuriman tribe, but she's getting older, so she's kind of stepping down. She and Rise follow Brand down into some old ruins in Shurima where the rune is hidden, and Rise breaks the runes. They're kind of being attacked this whole time by these creatures that were twisted by the power of the rune, these old people technically that used to live here that have been corrupted by the power of the runes. They're attacking them, so Rise undoes the protection spells he had put on the rune and enters, but then of course, because he had lowered the protection spells, Brand is immediately there too, and they fight each other. While they're busy fighting and distracted, Kala attacks Brand easily, just kind of knocks her aside. And she lands pretty close to where one of the where the rune has been knocked to the ground. So she picks it up and is immediately kind of overpowered by the sheer power of the rune. And she asks Rise, can I use this power to bring back my dead sons? And Rise is like, yeah, technically, but not like you think, and not like you're gonna want.
Answer. Bad answer.
No.
He's not a liar, though. He's not a liar.
Yeah, that's true. If he's a lot of things, not all of them good, but he's not a liar. At this point, as soon as she says that, Brand starts mocking Rise. He's like, "What are you gonna do, Rise? Do you have the strength to kill her before she's corrupted? Or are you just as weak as you used to be? Are you gonna fail another apprentice?" Luckily, it doesn't come to that. Kala has the strength to give the rune to Rise, and the two manage to escape the crumbling temple together while Brand is vowing vengeance on the two of them. They get to the surface, and Kala's kind of like, is he going to follow us? He seemed pretty strong. But Rise is like, nah. He's used up his power for now. He's just going to slumber for a bit.
His ulta cooldown.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting little bit about Brand. I guess he goes in spurts, and then he gets real tired and has a little lie down.
I wish he didn't use the word spurts.
He just climaxes all over, and then he's got to take a nap.
So yeah, that's Burning Lands. That's the comic. If you want to read it, don't go to Rise's page or Brand's page. It's not there. Just search for the Burning Lands on the Googles, and it'll still take you to Universe, despite how hard the comic actually is to find on the Universe page.
You know what it is they're getting you into the mindset of Rise, where you got to trek long distances to get the secret knowledge.
Everything's a puzzle.
Yeah.
I do like how Brand is mocking Rise, saying that like he's the one who failed, in Brand like giving in to the power of the rune. You know what I mean? He's like, "Oh, Rise, are you gonna fail another apprentice?" And the new apprentice is just like, "No, man, here." It's like, well, Brand, maybe this wasn't Rise's failure. Maybe it was yours, bro.
But now he's powerful.
It's fair.
It's fair. Until he needs his nappies, you know.
Yeah.
I will say, kind of to your point, Rebecca, I do wish that Rise was put a little bit more through his paces in this, and did have to make more of a decision, rather than, you know, this person just randomly being able to say no to something that, from everything I've seen about world runes, are massively. It's like the One Ring. It's like saying someone actually it's like a Frodo Baggins over there, man, being willing to give that stuff up.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Adventure Zone balance, like the artifacts there, and how they're supposed to. Everyone's very tempted by them. Maybe if Rise's new apprentice was somebody that we knew in some way or had some kind of connection with, that would have made more sense. But you're putting a lot of growth on this side character who we've never met before.
Yeah, especially after it's been kind of said that Rise's master himself, who Rise always considered was like had a stronger strength of character than even Rise did, like he gave in to the temptation too. Like,
who's Kala? Damn, she's powerful. Can we get a champion for her?
And maybe she'll show back up again.
I was gonna say, is she a Runeterra card yet, Mark? Oh, they haven't done Shurima yet, have they?
Well, I'll have to keep an eye out for her then. You know what? I'll bet $5 right now that she does end up. You know what? No, I shouldn't do that, because it's not on the Universe page, and no one knows who the fuck she is.
No, that's true. That's true.
She would be a good one, but she won't be, probably, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought, she had a very distinctive look. She had a very cool scarring on her face. You know, the type of thing that you would expect from someone who's easy to, recognize. What is it with Rise and scarred people, too? Because we know Brand had a scarred up face.
I don't know.
It's his thing, I guess.
Yeah.
It's his thing.
Do we have any other thoughts on this before, John? Are there any AUs for you to dive into?
So while there aren't technically AUs, there are a few cinematics, and I mean, there's kind of like the unofficial, like he shows up, like Vandal Brand has a cameo and like punches and plants, but like not an official skin AU or anything like that. There are a few cinematics, and we're going over our very first champion, who has a oh god, I forgot the name of it already.
Wait, real quick,
Judgment?
is he not in the Academy?
Judgment.
Brand's not in the
is he not
Academy
in Academy
AU?
Adventures?
I couldn't find him in there.
I think that's the first one.
Ryan.
Is one who's not been in Academy Adventures.
Yeah, I didn't see him in there.
That's fucking shocking, frankly.
I know,
Right?
I'm really shocked. I would have thought he'd be like a cook or something, and the kids cook over his flaming body.
Or maybe like a pottery, he runs the kiln. Like,
I like that. It's the pottery.
Maybe soon. It's still ongoing, maybe. So
Sure. They'll get them all. They'll
Yeah,
get 'em
Riot,
all eventually.
give me pottery brand, Riot. Come on.
So, Brand may or may not be in the Rise cinematic. Now, there are some questions here. I mean, I guess Rise himself probably for sure isn't, but so there is one
Rise
scene.
himself isn't?
Or sorry, Brand
Oh my
himself.
God. Okay,
sorry. There is one scene in the Rise cinematic where Rise is looking over a huge amount of fiery destruction, which unfortunately looks like it could be two things. It could be one, the Brand destruction from Brand's bio, where he, held the rune and then just blew up that whole area. Or it could be the thing from Rise's bio, where kind of his hometown got destroyed as like the first thing of the Rune War. There are reasons why it does and doesn't work for both. I think I am more inclined to think this is not the Brand version. I will say right before that scene, there's a quote in the video that says, "Others seek to claim this power for strength, balance," and then they really linger on, or control, which seems just like such a callback to the whole thing Brand was talking about wanting to control the power of the world runes instead of letting it flow through. And then he goes on to say, "I was weak then, naive," which also really sounds like they're talking about Brand. But when you look at one thing in the cinematic, during that scene, he doesn't have the scroll on his back, which he had when he picked up Kegan in the first place.
That's a really good catch. I didn't notice that, but that's an excellent catch.
Which would imply it was before. But in Rise's story, it also does specifically say that his master Tyrus was on the peak with him, overlooking the catastrophe, and he's alone on that peak. But I will say that the kind of tipping point for me is that if you actually look at the Runeterran map, there's kind of a feature on there where you can toggle like story bits, and you can see parts of the map that factor into different stories. And there is a section right next to the coast, right in front of kind of like a big section of the coast that looks like it's been carved out, maybe by some sort of mysterious explosion, like talked about in Rise's lore. And it says that is where that scene takes place. So that kind of leads me to believe that it's the Rise storyline as opposed to Brand. But still, not confirmed either way, I don't think.
I'm heavily inclined to think that it is what we have described in Rise's bio, because there's a line in there about it carving such a great swath from the earth that the sea rushed in. And when you go and look at the map, because I also was looking into this, like you said, it's very clearly, exactly, like a bay that has been kind of man-made or quasi-man-made. The other thing I was going to say is that I know in Rise's bio, his hometown, Khom, I think it is, Khom, is part of the Noxai territories, so Proto-Noxus. And when you look at the architecture on the buildings that are getting blown up, to me it read very, very Noxus in the look of it. So I would definitely say, in my opinion, that's what we're seeing. And that would to me point to him being even younger and more naive, right?
Yeah. So the other thing that is a potential connection, though again not confirmed because who knows timelines and all this shit, is in the Xerath story, where remember how we talked about how Xerath tricked Nasus and Renekton to leaving right before the coronation of Azir so that they wouldn't be able to stop him from doing his evil deeds. Mm-hmm. In Xerath's story, it specifically says that he called them away to deal with a being of pure fire locked in a magical sarcophagus. And when Nasus and Renekton returned, it's not said whether or not, it's not said what happened to that being of pure fire. All we know is that they have the magical sarcophagus with them. So whatever was in it, not in there anymore, could have potentially been called away to deal with Brand and one of his nappy naps.
I mean, it's possible. I would be inclined to say that's probably old lore, where we had Brand as this sort of eternal fire entity, and I don't even know if it's still the case that's actually. I don't know. I need to go look at that lore again to go see if that's actually what's in there. I would guess that's probably a holdover from what he used to be as opposed to what he is now.
That makes sense.
But it's kind of there. Talking about timelines as well, if you go and look, and also about the map, if you go and look at Raigan's Reach, you'll see that it's supposed to have been burnt down centuries ago by an evil witch and sorcerer. So I think we can. So it's interesting to consider that the rise, the From the Ashes story, is taking place, like I said, like a couple centuries, a couple hundred years from where, current day Runeterra, whatever that means, and also that those superstitions and those things that were kind of at the root of all of this are still persisting and continuing on through the ages, which I thought is a neat touch to include in this map piece. That who the hell is going to go look at that, right?
Now, is that on just kind of the general universe thing, or is that kind of in the Ezreal's notes section? Because I'm curious if they're kind of mixing, if that's like an in-character thing, or if they're mixing actual, like, what happened with inhabitants' perception of what happened.
Well, I know it's it's whatever you see when you click. You can click on the little little towns or whatever on the map, and it'll give you the tiny little blurb about it. That's not the Ezreal's notes. Ezreal's notes are very much Ezreal's voice, right? I think I've seen those before. Yeah, so I think this is just supposed to be in the region and probably in the surrounding towns or villages. That's probably the perception. Oh, there was an evil witch and her evil son. And the town, burnt down, and all the survivors probably spread out and, carried that rumor out, right? That would be my guess.
Interesting. Although it's weird to know that, like, maybe we can't trust all the stuff on the map now if we're getting, like, the in-lore interpretations of what actually happened as opposed to the true story.
That's really true. It's really something that we should keep an eye out for going forward, because I kind of assumed that it was all pretty... Or if it was something that was very biased, we would be able to get a clear read on it. But if you had not read this story, you certainly wouldn't have any reason to doubt it, I would say. So,
Interesting.
It's an interesting aspect.
Yeah. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the old... Well, the old lore is pretty easy. Originally, Brand was a spirit who inhabited bodies. He was a creature of everlasting fire and was sealed away by a magical ritual until he received a new vessel in Kegan Road. I don't know how to pronounce it. We'll say Road. Rod Hay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So this is the first champion we're going over who went through a league judgment, which is something that all new champions had to go through for a specific period of time after the original slew of champions, but before Riot abandoned summoners as a concept. So, in Brand's story, each of these stories goes through two sections, the observation and the judgment. So in the observation section, they're meeting Brand. So basically, Brand is on the road heading to Demacia, and he's stopped by Garen and Lux and a summoner. Now, Brand decides he looks at Garen and is like, okay, he's strong. And then he looks at Lux and is like, ooh, she's a mage. I got to take care of her first. And then he looks at the summoner and was like, oh shit, she can wait. I got to handle this guy. And shoots all his strongest magics at them, and the summoner just kind of puts up shields and doesn't care about it because summoners are OP in old lore. So he just basically just captures Brand on his own, and then takes him to where they do all their judgments, then just starts looking through his memories. So he looks through and sees flashbacks of the ritual that imprisoned Brand originally, as well as the destruction that Brand wrought when he was finally freed. And was basically like, nah, my dude, you are way too dangerous to be let free. We cannot let you around, so we will give you two options. We will either do that ritual that I saw in your memory, and we'll just imprison you again forever, or you can fight. You can fight in the League of Legends, which, old lore, if you didn't know, is a place where champions would fight each other to settle conflicts amongst nations to avoid open war and avoid another rune war from happening.
So weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bran's like, imprisonment sucks. So does a leash, but I guess I'll take a leash. So he decides to fight for the league.
It's so funny going back and just thinking about that concept. It's...
I know.
Oh, man. God. It makes me really glad that we don't do that anymore, to be frank.
Yeah. It was definitely something that was... They were stretching for some way to justify why this would be happening, which, I get why they did at the time, but I definitely appreciate their decision to be like, no, we've got our lore and we've got our game, and they're not connected. We're not going to try and force it.
Yeah, I don't know. I will see whenever I go back. I say go back. Whenever I go and look at, I'll pull up YouTube videos for lore just to try and get perspectives or try and find something that I might have missed. And every now and then you'll see comments by people saying, man, I really missed the league. It doesn't make any sense. Why are they fighting? I was like, man, have you read the old lore? It's not good in my opinion, I suppose. But it's strange to me how there seems to be like a small contingent of people who really, long for those old summoner days. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, last thing is that Rise is also part of the Ignite cinematic. This was one of the world cinematics, and this was one where they specifically animated highlights from previous worlds. So Bran shows up here, reliving Game 2 of the Season 1 World Final match between Fnatic and Against All Authority.
Oh my god, Against All Authority.
Yeah.
It's a name I haven't heard.
EU teams in the very first finals. Even when the World Finals was just North America and Europe, North America still can't make it to finals.
Keeping the tradition alive, baby.
Oh, we know.
I do like the video. I always like General Odd One's salute. And then, Baron catch. It's great. It makes me well up, a little bit. It's like, oh man.
Yeah, this is good. I like the video. I like the song. And if you ever, League of Legends also put out a YouTube video that is actually just all of the specific clips that are being referenced in the video. That's fun too. Just kind of see highlights from previous worlds.
Do we have any final thoughts on Brand?
Maybe not about Bran specifically, but I will say this story, in addition to what we got with Ashe, is making me warm up to the Freljord. As a region, I'll be honest, because I know you and I, Rebecca, I think had a similar feeling of it's kind of boring and maybe some of the larger scale conflicts I don't find terribly interesting, but the way through this they have really fleshed out a lot of boots on the ground type perspectives and seeing different people and how living in or being raised up in that way has affected them has really, to me, helped flesh it out, and I'm starting to like it more, and I'm more interested in seeing more of it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't realize I would prefer it, because personally I don't like fantasy stories that are about like fighting for some kind of throne or something, and a lot of other cities or areas of Runeterra involve like, I guess, a royalty in some way, and I find that very uninteresting. But yeah, I do like specifically the mention of Rise saying that people who grow up here, they're just trying to survive, and the survival instinct is the first one always and forever. And we forget we don't think about what it could be like to live that way and how it would affect you. So yeah, I'm definitely enjoying the Freljord, and I'm excited to see more people from it.
Well, you're in luck.
I think
another thing. I don't think we often finish reading stories and then think like, I want to learn more about that character because I've really enjoyed what I read so far. Like, at least the ones we've gone over so far, like that's been the minority. So it's nice to read through something and be like, man, this was really good. now I just want like more of that.
Yeah.
But with this other side.
For sure.
Yeah, like connect
For
the dots
sure.
more for me. It was this and like
Definitely.
Annie. I had that with Annie that I wanted more.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I was also just going to mention that I thought it was interesting that we're again with the Freljord seeing a repetition of the themes of motherhood, for better or worse, and how it has shaped characters. It's an interesting kind of through line for this Ash. Those are the main two that I can think of. Anivia, not quite so much, because Anivia was so
Sejuani.
detached. Yeah, Sejuani for sure. And I'll be curious to see, I don't know, what comes up with Braum. I don't think we'll see much of that with him. I could be wrong. Although he has a quote where he's like, "Mother always says," so who knows? But no, it was an interesting thing to kind of keep in here. I liked it.
Yeah, we've tackled Brand. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying the podcast, if you could review it on like Apple Podcasts or iTunes or wherever you happen to listen to it, tell your friends, tweet it out. We don't advertise, so the only way anyone will hear about this podcast is if some of y'all talk about it, which would be very cool. And join us next week when we will be talking about the heart of the Freljord, Braum.